Hello and welcome to our latest and greatest episode of Better Together Arizona. I am your host, Angela Hughey. I am so excited to be joined by my dear friend and colleague, Michael Soto. Michael is the president of Equality Arizona and, along with myself, the co-founder of the Equality and Fairness Campaign. We're a group of LGBTQ+ business and faith leaders working together to successfully codify non-discrimination protections here in Arizona and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
We have big dreams, don't we, Michael?
We really do. Yes.
Our conversation today is going to focus on updates regarding the executive orders that the Trump administration issued a few weeks ago. So this is like a follow-up to the wonderful conversation that Michael and I had 2 weeks ago. And we're also going to talk about the policy landscape at the state level, right? And how we can work together to push through these headwinds that we're facing. All right, let's get started. So, how are people responding? Michael, we're about a month into the second Trump administration.
Yep.
What changes are we seeing in everyday life?
Yeah.
And how are the changes the Trump administration is carrying out impacting the daily lives of Americans?
Such a good question. The changes that the Trump administration is making around LGBTQ people, but also just sort of by and large, I think are making Americans feel uncertain, right? Because there's
a lot of fear.
There's a lot of fear, right? And there are people that are afraid to lose their job. There are people that have lost their jobs, like park rangers and people responsible for ensuring that wildfires here in the West don't consume our cities.
Organizations that we're near and dear to that can't draw down funding, or they can draw it down one day and then they can't draw it down the next, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The potential impact. I mean, we have a measles outbreak in Texas already, where childhood polio may be
reintroduced.
The impact of global aid, right, being denied to so many countries will likely have an impact on all sorts of diseases, including a new rise in HIV and AIDS, right, because of ending PrEP distribution, right,
and condom distribution, right?
Yes,
it's interesting. I was
things.
talking to a family member, and it seemed to me that condom distribution had been politicized.
Yeah.
And I think some of these conversations with folks that I know and love that voted for this incoming administration, what I'm really learning from these conversations is people don't understand how interconnected everything is, and that we really do live in a global society, right?
We do, yeah. And there are always unintended consequences when you create new policy, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that Americans are learning right now. Like, the Trump administration or the campaign spent, $200 million
$200 million villainizing, right? Transgender
people.
Americans, which make up less than 1% of America's population.
Yes.
But if you are a target of these ads, $200 million worth of ads that are just hyper targeting. I know I received a few text messages and videos that were really concerning, and they were concerning because they were untrue, right?
Yes.
But if that's all you're seeing, then you see you believe things about transgender Americans that are just simply not true.
And you don't understand that what the president's administration actually is going to do is it has very little impact on has very little to do with the fact that, the president can't make trans people disappear, right? So he may campaign on we don't exist.
The administration can wipe all references of transgender people off
from
federal
websites and documents, but they can't change the fact that I exist. Exactly. I didn't disappear. But what the campaign, or what the now administration actually wants to do, is far more extensive than just saying, trans people and undocumented people, these sort of fringe, tiny minorities in society.
I think the DEI stuff says people of color and women too.
It does, and it even extends further than that. We saw, after President Trump, over and over again says, he doesn't support cuts to Medicaid. Yesterday endorsed the House version of the budget that extensively cuts Medicaid, right? We've got much more happening than just the shiny objects.
Game, right?
It is.
So the shiny objects, unfortunately, are members of our community who are some of the most vulnerable members of our community, because we're not just talking about transgender Arizonans and Americans. We're talking about transgender kids, right?
Exactly.
So you're like demonizing members of our LGBTQ+ community and people that are members of culturally diverse communities
Yep.
and women. And while you're doing all of this, everyone's paying attention to all of this chaos, right? And then it's like, hey, while no one's looking, let's start working on those cuts to Medicare and Medicaid.
Exactly.
And is Social Security on the table too?
Right. Yeah. Like what comes next, right? And like it's this gutting of the essential functions of government that is actually going to be the result of the Trump administration. And again, we're seeing that already. I mean, the new director of the FBI, right, was just confirmed. And so his whole point in being there is to dismantle the FBI, right? So it's just, there was all of the propaganda, all the ads focused on, tiny minority groups like trans people and undocumented people. But what the goals of the administration actually are to dismantle the functions of government that actually keep people safe.
So, Sharon and I take our little walks in the morning, and so there's a gentleman that we come across several times a week as we're off to get our steps in early in the day.
Love it.
And so we have these really thoughtful conversations sometimes early in the morning. And what his point to me was today was, well, if you dismantle the federal government, what's going to happen is you're going to bring all of those responsibilities down to the states.
Right.
And he's like, and if the states if the state government has to get larger, he's like, what do you think is going to happen? I'm like, well, taxes on the state level are going to go up.
Yep.
Right. So, I mean, this really is like we're playing hide the pea here is what we're doing.
Yeah. And we have many state governments in this country that are also dismantling the state government. Right. And so then that gets pushed out even further to the cities and the counties. Right. So it's just a mess, and ultimately
everyone's kicking the can down the road.
They are, and they're making it significantly harder for government to meet its essential functions, which are just creating the basic services and safety that Americans rely on in every aspect of life. And so
we politicize transgender folks, we politicize DEI, we've got all these shiny objects out there, and while everyone's paying attention to this and are really have some deep concerns, right?
Yes.
Then there's this dismantling of the government that's happening literally in plain day
100%.
Sight, right?
Yep.
But folks are too busy kind of being back on their heels, wondering if their organization is going to lose funding for grants that they've already been receiving, for work that they've already been done. So it's it's so deeply concerning. And there's yesterday and earlier this week, I came across, because of some of the work we do and because people trust us, like 2 situations where LGBTQ people were harassed in public. One in the East Valley. One is a video on Facebook that has now gone viral at an In-N-Out Burger where a woman harasses a lesbian couple and their daughter, saying that they're sex trafficking her because they're taking her to the restroom in an In-N-Out Burger. Right. So and this woman, like, verbally and physically accosts this family.
The video is shocking.
It's horrific.
That this woman who is accosting this family, including this child, is not arrested in the video is shocking to me. Like, she is literally being a violent and dangerous person, and these mothers are protecting their child. Like, I don't know a single parent that allows their child to go to the bathroom in public without them. Like, they're being good parents.
No, and apparently they were visitors to the great state of Arizona, is my understanding. Yeah. So, I mean, what kind of a message does that send about just safety in the state of Arizona? And
it says we're not welcoming, we're not safe.
Right. Yeah. So, and we had the dismantling of the Office of Diversity recently in the city of Scottsdale. Yeah. You have people that are saying disparaging things to LGBTQ people on a main street in a municipality in Arizona, and then you have this family that is harassed verbally, and it's a physical altercation. This woman like really physically comes at this
she does.
This family simply because they're LGBTQ.
She does. Yeah, it's very clear that like one of the consequences, and I think this is an intended consequence of the executive orders, right, and the administrative actions that the Trump administration is taking, is to give permission to people that hate LGBTQ people, that think we are wrong for being who we are, that have prejudice and bias against us. It's giving them permission to be public about that again, right? To say that out loud.
I just want to say this, and who knows what's going to happen with this woman, and if there's an investigation, it might be too soon to know what the final outcome is there. Totally. But harassing someone is unlawful.
It is.
Physically
assaulting someone
someone is unlawful,
Yes.
it doesn't matter what your orientation
Nope.
or identity is.
Nope.
That's unlawful, not just in the state of Arizona, but throughout this nation.
Exactly.
So I think, to your point, people feel emboldened, but we are still a state and a country of laws. And, I think it's important that we're having thoughtful conversations with law enforcement about making sure that everyone that they are, here to protect and serve is protected, and that there's really good dialogue going on within our diverse communities and with law enforcement to ensure that these are outlier situations and that this type of harassment and behavior does not really catch hold.
I think it's more important than ever, especially with the anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion executive orders that are being passed, because that has resulted in some law enforcement agencies cutting the positions of officers who it was their job
community engagement.
Yes, to be there.
Community engagement and community policing is good policing.
It's very good. We know that, right? Every study you look at in terms of policing and communities, if you have deep relationship with the communities, you're gonna the policing agencies are more successful and the communities are safer.
Well, and there is distrust, right, in diverse communities with law enforcement, and so I really think it's incumbent on all of us to kind of lean in and say we need to build trusting relationships within all of our communities and with law enforcement, so that they can do a better job. And also, when we have trusting relationships, we're all going to be safer, right? So now is the time for all of us to lean in and work on having trusted relationships with law enforcement, not to silo ourselves. Right?
Agreed.
All right. So any law enforcement people, if you're listening, we are here to be of service and to have good conversations within our community, because we want to make sure our community is safe. We want to make sure all communities are safe.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's just a general overview of kind of the temperature and how people feel after these first 4 weeks or so of this new administration. The last time we got together, though, we extensively went into the 4 executive orders that at that time had been signed that specifically were meant to target our transgender community.
Yes.
So I want to go back and say a president can sign an executive order, but the executive order has to be within the letter and the law. And so sometimes executive orders may have some overreach, may be found unconstitutional, like the appropriations piece was, right? So it was, if you may have already be getting grants, these funds have been appropriated, and then the next day the judge said, no, that's unconstitutional, and they said, all right, we'll turn the spigot back on for people that have already been awarded these grants and the dollars that have already been appropriated. So we expected some legal challenges when we last got together. Let's go through these kind of one by one, and I'm hoping you can catch up our viewers and our listeners on where we're at with the anti-transgender executive orders.
You got it. Okay. So a lot's happened. This is a very fluid environment. So the first executive order was the trans erasure bill, or executive order, essentially an executive order that attempted to define sex and gender on not scientific basis, not a medical reality, but on an ideological reality that said there are only 2 genders or sexes, and that they're based on your genetic characteristics at birth, essentially. And so there's lots wrong with that. We went over this last time. There's a lot that's not true about that. There's a lot that is not based on reality or a reflection of developmental human science, right, that we actually understand. So what this executive order does, its whole purpose was to set the foundation for all of these other executive orders, right? And to say
it's the first strike.
It's the first strike. And it's the attempt to go back 100 years even further, and saying there are these natural human categories that we should base everything off of, based on pseudoscience, essentially. And that creates an environment that makes it possible to justify everything from, kicking trans people out of the military to restricting the rights of women based on, sort of natural limitations of people around gender.
So because I'm female, I'm naturally limited.
Right. So,
I don't think the people that know me
race.
would tell you that I'm naturally limited.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So these are debunked, right, ideas, but they're trying to reintroduce them through transgender people that they will then be expanded, right? So so the executive order also, so it had an impact on federal IDs, right? So on passports, on global entry, and on visas. It also impacted people that are under the stewardship of the federal government. So this is people that are being incarcerated in federal prisons or detention centers, right? So we've seen interesting developments and good developments because this executive order is in many ways not lawful, and so we saw challenges almost immediately beginning to this, and so we've got 3 court challenges already to the piece of this executive order that deals with people in federal facilities, right, that are being incarcerated.
So you're incarcerated.
Exactly. And because of these, there is a temporary restraining order, right, a temporary injunction blocking the federal government executing this.
And I would imagine there's real world safety concerns.
There's enormous safety concerns, right? And so, so the whole point, I think, of transgender people wanting to talk about housing us appropriately when we are unable to house ourselves, whether that's in homeless shelters or whether that's in prisons or detention centers, is that we are frequently targeted by cisgender people for violence, right? And so the whole point is we want to be safe, and we deserve to be safe as possible, right, in those kinds of environments. And so, the truth is that you house trans people with cisgender people, and we're the ones that get hurt. And so fortunately, we've got judges that understand that, right, and that want to understand this issue better than the myths that the executive order tries to set out. And so there's a temporary injunction, right, that actually stops, and that actually did stop trans people being transferred from into an inappropriate housing.
Right. So currently, folks that are in detention centers or in prison are housed based on their gender identity.
Right. Exactly. So, and it also depends on the facility, right? It depends on there's a whole thing, a little bit like Maricopa County, right, has a whole policy that myself and Ashton, right, someone we both know and love, helped to develop, right, that was all about safety, right? It wasn't about any of the inflammatory rhetoric that the far right is using around trans people. It was about keeping trans people safe when we're already in a vulnerable situation, and keeping everyone safe, right? Everyone should be safe in those environments.
Right.
So trans people should not be an exception to that. So, and then there was the passport piece, right? And so the Secretary of State, almost immediately after the first executive order, issued directives to his department saying that they would no longer process gender marker changes.
Were they confiscating people's passports?
So they were holding them. Some people have started to get theirs back, but without being changed. And so it's been a little unclear, but there was a time when passports were not being given back to people. And so some of those folks have started to receive them back. It feels like with
all of these executive orders that we're just going to throw this out there and we're going to see what sticks.
Yes, exactly.
And if there is a court challenge or if we're told this is unconstitutional, then we'll kind of roll back and get within the lane that is actually lawful.
Yeah.
But we're just going to see how far we can go with all of
that. That is exactly what these executive orders are. These executive orders, like the Trump administration, is testing how far the American people will allow the executive branch and the administration go. Exactly. And how far we will allow their authority to exceed what is constitutional and what is normal in our society. So that's all of this. Everything is a test of how far will we allow this to go before we, as the American people, which ultimately, we have 3 branches of government, but the biggest check on all government is the American people.
It's the American people.
Exactly. So the passports have also been challenged. There's also a preliminary injunction on this. And so we've got the courts are moving fast, right? And they're trying to say, hey, whoa, slow down a second here. You are doing things that are not necessarily lawful.
Did I read that they're trying to fire judges?
Yes. There's lots happening.
Now I know why they're trying to fire judges.
Right. Well, again, that we are living in a time of rising authoritarianism, right, throughout not just the country but throughout the world. And we're seeing authoritarianism. This is kind of the scary part of authoritarianism is it's not just one political side, right? Authoritarianism can be right wing and left wing, and we're seeing both iterations throughout the world. But two of the things about that, authoritarian governments test the limits of their authority and power, like we're seeing the Trump administration do, and they get rid of people that try to be a roadblock or object to that within the workings of government. And a judge.
A judge would do that.
There you go.
Or
exactly.
Seems to be doing that with judges around the country. Seem to be doing that with a number of these executive orders.
Yes, or lawyers, right, that refuse to drop cases against clearly corrupt mayors, right? I mean, very conservative Federalist Society lawyer, right, being like, hey, I'm a prosecutor. This is my job. I'm not just dropping this case because you want him to be your friend and he's doing what you want. That's not lawful. So... Okay, so that's the first executive order. So we've got 4 challenges in total to that executive order right now. Then we get the transgender military ban. So the military ban has 2 current challenges, and essentially the changes haven't been implemented yet in the military because
everything's on hold.
Right. So the executive order gave a window of time, right?
90 days to come up with a report.
60 and 90, exactly. And so I think there was a 30-day marker, a 60-day, and a 90-day. So that's going to take time for recommendations and then changes to make. But there's a judge has already said that essentially as soon as the Department of Defense makes these changes, they're going to notify the plaintiffs, the people who brought the case, and then they'll consider a preliminary injunction. So it's unlikely that those changes will be able to go into effect because they are likely unlawful. And also, I think it's really important to note that this executive order in particular around the military ban, the language is so biased, it's so prejudiced against trans people that the judges have noted that. They've said, hey, by the way, this isn't factual. This isn't based on reality. This is a lot of just prejudice written into an executive order about people who are currently proving that executive order wrong by serving with honor and distinction. So that's important. Capable. And are fully capable, fully trained.
In a merit-based society.
Exactly. And who are living up to all of the standards, whether those be standards around honor and integrity or standards around skills and talent. And so...
Got it.
So that's important to note. So,
good to know.
All right. So then we get to the gender affirming care ban, executive order ban. And again, this is not just minors. It also includes young adults. So I like to make sure that we note that every single time because to call it just a ban for minors is inaccurate because it does include people who are young adults. So this, again, there is a temporary block on this. There are 2 cases that have been brought, one in Maryland and one by the state of Washington. And so this executive order has been noted by these judges basically in a sort of a similar way that the transgender medical ban or transgender military ban has been noted, that the language is highly prejudiced, right? That it is not necessarily reflective of reality or medical best practices, and that it's in fact dangerous for an executive order to single out one type of treatment as then being unavailable to the American people. So especially because it does include adults as well.
But if I remember this correctly, it's not that this type of treatment wouldn't be available to the American people. It would only not be available to transgender Americans.
Yes, to one specific kind of people, right? And so that's like saying, yeah, absolutely. So that's like saying, oh, well, white women can get hysterectomies or white women can't get hysterectomies, but black women and women of color are forced to get them, right? Or can get them, or right? And we've lived in that society where, like those sorts of things happen, right? Of this kind of group can get this kind of medicine, but this group can't. And often that's based on prejudiced ideas, right? About who should be reproducing or who should have certain kinds of access to certain kinds of life. And so
All right.
So, all right.
Okay, so that's being challenged.
That's being challenged. So then we got one more. And so this is actually about a new executive order that had not been issued by the last time that we talked. And so since then, there's been an executive order that is a federal ban on trans women participating in athletics. And so
K through 12.
Yes. And so this ban essentially it also like.
Does this go into college
extends
too?
A little further, yeah. And
I think
also,
it does go into
it
college.
goes into college, and it
and they want it in the Olympics.
Yeah, they're trying to.
Is what I've heard is on True Social.
Right, they're trying to.
I have not been to True Social, but that's what I've heard.
I love it. So this executive order, it basically again sets a clear position that this administration does not want transgender people to be included in society, and sets a prejudiced and biased, sort of standard around trans people that's not the same as other kinds of people. It threatens to withhold federal dollars and to investigate groups, school districts, colleges, right, organizations that are inclusive under Title IX, which is wild. So it's a strange interpretation of Title IX. It orders other executive agencies to convene with sporting bodies, including international bodies that they have no authority over, and try to get them to conform to this executive order.
He's doing a lot internationally right now.
He is, and making a lot of weird choices, quite frankly. It uses the same kind of language, to keep trans people out of athletics that have been used to justify excluding all women from athletics in general, and to reinforce segregation in athletics. And so again, this executive order, just like the other executive orders, is at its core an attempt to re-legalize discrimination based on immutable human characteristics like gender, race, sex, right? All of these things that we can't change. So trying to re-legalize discrimination based on those things, and attempting to re-legalize segregation based on immutable human characteristics. So
I had forgotten to tell you a story.
Oh, yes. Tell me. Okay.
As I'm listening to the keeping men out of women's sports narrative.
Yes.
So my lovely wife and I were in the grocery store last week. I totally forgot about this. This was mind-blowing. Early morning, because we like to do things early in the morning. We're in the grocery store, and we decided that we wanted to get something from the deli. And there's a guy at the deli, and he's, I think, tasting some potato salad. And he looks over to the two of us, and he says, "Well, you two are cute. Are you related?" And I just have this belief that if you ask me a direct question, I'm going to answer it directly. And so I was like, I'm not sure how to answer this one, but I just felt like I was like, And I said, well, kind of. And he said, oh, are you sisters? And I said, no, we're a married couple. And his eyes got really big, and he got a step back, and he goes, how do you feel about those transgender men in sports? And I was like, this is at 7:00 in the morning.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's like, I really like what President Trump is doing. And I said, well, have a good day.
Good for you.
Right.
Like, it's too early for this conversation.
I'm too early. But it was so interesting, right? Like the guy thought, I think, that we were attractive, which I mean, I'll
you are. Y'all are super
Thank
cute.
Thank you. Yeah. And then, he thought that maybe we were sisters. But then when he realized that our relationship was different than that, then his response was, it changed. Just the way he wanted to converse with us. Yeah. Anyway, I was like, enjoy your day. And I hope the potato salad was good.
Right. Yeah. Like, good luck, buddy.
Wow.
Yeah. It's, here's the thing that I keep telling people. Again, also, this is being challenged, right? The trans ban for athletics. There's already a court challenge to that, which is great. And again, like, the thing that I keep telling people with athletics is I get this question a lot from people, especially from men, from cisgender men, which is fascinating to me because the whole premise here is protecting women's sports. And it's almost exclusively cisgender men that have this concern. When I talk to cisgender women, especially those who have played sports, and I know quite a few because I played sports my entire, growing up and into young adulthood. And I played women's sports because I had not transitioned yet. And so they don't share this concern by and large, right? This is not like women who have been athletes don't have this concern around trans people in sports because they've played with a lot of some have played with trans people. There are very few of us, right? I think there's right now there are 530,000 collegiate athletes in the United States, and I think there are less than 10 that are trans. So again, just put this into perspective.
Numbers are really important because I think like if you see this narrative and this political narrative,
yep.
I think that it can be easy to believe that the numbers are not 10 out of 530,000.
Right. Yeah, over 500,000, right? And 10.
People.
So, let's always put this into perspective. But when you actually talk to women who play sports, who have played sports in K through 12, in college, in professional sports, right? This is not a concern that is top of mind for them. When they want to talk about fairness, they want to talk about pay equity, they want to talk about appropriate facilities, right? They want to talk about a real investment in women's sports. Trans people being included in sports is not their top issue. Also, that tells me, right, then the right forum to have these conversations around creating fairness in sports is with people that sports are their career and their life.
So you think that that policy should be created with sports professionals?
100%. And with all sports professionals, right? Riley Gaines she's one person who has deeply ideological ideas about this.
Which
and
is her paid.
Right. It is her right, absolutely. But she's paid to have those ideas and be a spokesperson for them. So while certainly she has a right to be included in this discussion as a former athlete, her viewpoint is not everyone's viewpoint.
And it's not the only viewpoint at the table.
And it's not the majority viewpoint of women in athletics. Let's be honest about that.
And we've had this conversation about the Arizona Interscholastic Association, right? Which prior to the K through 12 sports ban that was put in place under former Governor Ducey, the AIA had a policy in place for, I want to say 6 or 8 years. I can't remember. I need to look back and see how many. But I think during that time, there's 177,000 kids that play K through 12 interscholastic sports.
Yep.
And there were like 6 kids that had gotten the green light to play sports based on their gender identity.
And only 8 who had a total applied.
Right. So it also said that the policy was working because not everybody had hit the metrics that needed to be.
Exactly.
So it was a good policy.
It was a good policy.
But, so if say it's a 6-year period of time, 177,000 kids a year, that's 1 million kids playing K through 12 sports.
Exactly.
And 6 transgender kids playing in that amount of time. And it's
with 1 million.
I think that it's important for people to understand these numbers because, again, that's not the feeling. In particular, like if you're on social media and there's the algorithms, and this is what's all that's swirling around, right?
Right. You think that there are 200,000 trans kids,
there's
right?
There's targeted campaigns going on with, when the current administration, when he was running for office, $200 million in targeted anti-trans campaigns. I think it's easy for people to unfortunately buy into the misinformation and the disinformation and have it cloud their judgment and their viewpoint.
Right. And think that the scale of these issues, often these manufactured issues, right, are very wildly different than they are, right? Again, trans people, we're consistently about 0.5% of any human population. There is no reality in which every girls volleyball team in the country is being taken over by trans people. We don't have the numbers, it's just not going to happen. And also, I also try to remind people the scale piece all of this is so important, but also why we need to put this not in the hands of the federal government, whether that's Congress, the president, or state governments.
But the professionals that
do this every day and really care about fairness for all people. Yeah. And I remind people, sports are divided in so many ways, and often depending on the sport in different ways, right? And that can be by the main, sort of dividing factor for sports is talent. Number one, the next
what
is
I love
age.
About talent is it's an equalizer, right?
It is an equalizer. You have to be this good to play on this kind of team, right?
Sports is an equalizer. You have to be talented enough to make the team.
You do, and if you're not talented enough for professional or for collegiate, there are other ways you can play, right? And so sports are divided in lots of different ways, by weight class in some sports, not by weight class in others. We don't know what the right solution is until we let the sports people, the professionals who do this every day, actually come up with the system that creates more fairness for all people, right? This is a relatively new thing that sports are grappling with. Let's let them figure it out.
Right. And what you're saying is it's evolving. We need to have the thoughtful conversations.
Yes.
We need to have the difficult conversations. We need to have all the conversations so that we can come up with a policy that is fair to everyone that wants to participate in sports.
And that lets every sport figure that out for themselves, what is fairness, right? It probably looks different in archery than it does in rugby. And that just makes sense to me, right? Sure. There are different rules for both of those sports. They're very different kinds of sports. And so, let's do this in the ways that make sense. An executive order from the federal government is the thing that makes the least sense possible when it comes to sports.
I always thought that the Republican Party wanted less government.
Well, traditionally, they do when it comes to financial sectors, when it comes to business and regulation.
But unfortunately, governing who we are right now.
Yes. And unfortunately, really, we've seen this since like the 80s, the 70s and 80s, the Republican Party being very interested in governing the personal lives and decisions of Americans, but not regulating how corporations, businesses.
Well, I hate to break the news. Price of eggs is skyrocketing.
It's only going to get worse as well. I mean, look at what
the price of gas has gone up 35 cents in the last month in the state of Arizona. So, I mean, I think,
you can't create a trade war with our closest trading partners and expect the price of goods
go down.
Yeah, exactly. That's not how this works. It's not how it works. So,
there's the economics in all of this.
There's a lot of economics in it. I mean, all of this plays into each other, right? And ultimately, I think what we're seeing, whether it's these executive orders or tariffs and trade wars or the U.S. switching its entire position on the war that Russia instigated with Ukraine.
With an invasion of a country.
With an invasion of a country. Active invasion. Hot war, right? We're just seeing a real distortion and lack of understanding from this administration of reality and the appropriate ways for government to respond to that. Yeah. So.
I feel less safe.
I do too, honestly. I feel less safe as a trans person. I feel less safe as an American. I feel like the world is more uncertain.
I mean, I think that we're giving our adversaries an opportunity. I really do. So I really hope I'm wrong. But
we're giving our adversaries an opportunity and we're alienating longstanding allies, right? Like, why are we alienating NATO? That makes no sense. No. So there's a lot happening here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at One Community, we certainly know the importance of allyship, without a doubt. And, we know that a lot of times when there's issues that are surrounding our LGBTQ community, whatever the issue is, sometimes the elected officials don't necessarily want to hear from LGBTQ plus people. Right. Maybe they want to hear from the business community or the faith-based community, right? And so really that importance of active allyship, and to your point, Michael, that we are alienating our allies around the globe, it definitely gives me great concern.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Whew. So
federal government.
Deep breath. That's our overview on what's happening federally.
Yes.
Let's talk about LGBTQ plus rights at the state level.
Okay, let's do it. So a lot happening at the state level as well. So we're monitoring in total several dozen bills. 9 of them would directly impact LGBTQ people in negative ways.
Okay.
So we've got, let's see, how many House bills? 1, 2, 3, 4 House bills, and then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, even more. Sorry, we have more bills. Sorry, 18 total. So we've got some of these right there. So the thing is, okay, let's talk about the federal government before we do this.
Back to
not the federal government. I'm sorry, the state government. Let's talk about the makeup of our state government. So we have,
before we get into bills, let's talk about who controls the levers of power.
Exactly. So we, in Arizona, for my entire career working with government, have had Republican majority in the House and the Senate in the legislature. That is still true. And in this last election, Democrats lost seats in both of the houses.
So the Republican majority grew.
Yes,
in this
in
House
both the Senate and the House. And so we have Republicans in control of what bills get heard, what bills go through the process, right?
And we're a simple majority in our House and Senate, right?
Yes.
It's not, you need 60% of the vote, right? People don't understand the importance of the filibuster. You just need a majority. Simple majority.
Simple majority. Okay. And so we also, unfortunately, again, we're living in a time of sort of greater you are rewarded as a politician for being more extreme in both parties. And because we've got a Republican majority in the Arizona legislature, and we have people being elected to the Republican through the Republican primaries that are more extreme, right? That have
right. They're not less moderate, less willing to work across the aisle and find common ground.
And holding some of these beliefs that they're holding beliefs and ideologies that are untrue, right? That are not based in reality or fact, but they're based on propaganda, namely MAGA propaganda, right?
Got it.
And so we've got a difficult situation in the legislature. But we have, thankfully, Governor Hobbs as the governor, right?
Who is the epitome of an active ally to the LGBTQ plus community.
Incredible ally, right? And incredible in terms of also as the executive of our state. She can't force the legislature to do their job and to focus on the issues that actually are of most importance to Arizonans, but she tries, and she does veto bills that are very much not the purview of the government, like many of these anti-LGBTQ bills. And so there are things that are overreach of government, like sports, right? Like these sorts of things, bathroom bills, right? All of these things that we've seen for over a decade now, many of them that essentially are trying to, again, re-legalize discrimination based on immutable characteristics or re-legalize segregation. And so fortunately, she's doing her job as the executive to veto these bills. We hope that she will do the same this year. She has the past 2 years. We have to, as allies, as advocates, we have to tell her we want her to keep doing that, right? And
right. I mean, it seems to me so you've talked about the fact that our Senate and our House are Republican majority. We've talked about the fact that bills pass by a simple majority,
right?
And so I think the third part of that discussion is that it means that these bills, these anti-LGBTQ plus bills, are going to pass because they don't need Democrats' votes.
They don't need Democrat support. Exactly. They're party lines. Yep.
And so the votes are there.
The votes are there
to pass these 18.
And the political will is there in the Republican Party.
Absolutely.
Right? So yes.
So 18 anti-LGBTQ plus bills that we believe are going to make it to Governor Hobbs' desk.
Exactly.
So
what do we do in that case, right?
Well, it seems to me like we need to be encouraging Governor Hobbs to continue to be the remarkable ally and actionable ally that she's been to the LGBTQ community.
Yep.
Make her aware that these bills are coming to her desk, and we know that they're coming to her desk.
Yeah.
And really encourage her to do what she's done for the last 2 years, which is to veto these bills.
Exactly. And I think even further, so something that you and I in past years, right, depending on the political climate, when the majority has been closer, right, in these, or the margin, right, has been closer in the houses when it's been a different political climate, we have worked to activate community members to bring them down to hearings, to testify, right, to be actively engaged in the process in a different time.
Right, because in a different makeup, right? Yes. So from a different political will. Less hostile climate than it is right now.
And a climate that's less interested in harm to LGBTQ people.
And more interested in the sustainability of for all Arizonans, right?
Exactly.
And moving our great state forward.
Exactly.
Right?
But we're not in that time right now.
No,
and so I want to pull in the curtains back a little bit here, because we convene a statewide LGBTQ coalition. We meet every 2 weeks with advocates and organizations throughout the state where we talk about political strategy. And in our first meeting, we all agreed that we were not going to be doing that this year. We actually made an active decision as organizations to not.
No good comes from going down to the Capitol this year.
It doesn't. Only harm. And the thing is that what I've noticed, right? Because I've done this work for decades, right? And when I first started this work, you brought 3 people down to testify on any issue. Legislators were listening, right? Their attention was on you. Yeah. They were asking you real questions. They were engaged with their constituents. That's not the reality that we live in right now. What happens now, I was at the first hearing in the legislative session around an anti-trans bill, which was the trans erasure bill. It's Lisa Fink's bill. She's on the committee. The room, there are lots of trans people in the room, right? We're sitting there. We wait till the very end when Chairman Blackman allows for it to be heard. They only allow 4 people to testify from either side, right? Which is a relatively new rule that they've been doing this for the last couple of years. It used to be you testified till you were done with everybody that wanted to talk. But what you get instead now is people like Representative Fink with a very smug smile on her face, listening to trans people describing the hurt and the harm, and our parents and other people, the harm that these bills cause, because she knows they're harmful and she wants it to be harmful. That's the difference. And so there is no
intentional harm.
It's intentional harm. It's mean. It's cruel on purpose, right? And so I think we have all agreed there is no way to influence these people who know they're doing harm and want to do harm. They're not,
and the votes are there.
The votes are there. And so we're not going to change anything at the legislature right now. So let's be smart advocates.
You have to change the playbook.
Exactly. So we've got to go where we can make change. We've got to go where we can support positive things happening, like the governor's office, right? And we've got to think about 2026. So all that being said, so there are a lot of bills. There are 3 that are of particular concern. So there's one, HCR 2042. So this is a ballot referral. So
right. So this is, and tell people what a concurrent resolution is. This goes past the governor's desk.
It does. It circumvents the governor. And so this is of concern because of that, right? So she can't veto it. So that's why it's of concern. This is an anti-DEI spending bill. I don't know if this is going to get through the process. One, because it's 2025, and that it's more likely that concurrent resolutions will pass next year
than this year. I was surprised to see this one. I really thought, I was like, wow, you're not taking any downtime. You're going to try and push these things through in 2025.
Yeah. So we'll see. But we have, we can beat this at the ballot box, right? Mm-hmm. So that's on our community to be educating people, the entire Arizona community that cares about fairness, that cares about economic stability in our state, right?
Well, and moving our state forward,
yes,
right?
Exactly. So this is something we can fight at the ballot box if we need to. We'll see. But concurrent resolutions are always of concern. But there are 2 bills in particular. We've got sort of the regular standard bills here of the trans erasure bill, which is mimicking the first executive order. We've got the pronouns bills, restrooms, all of that kind of stuff. Yep, those are standard fare at this point. We don't like them. We don't want them to pass, but they're pretty normal in legislatures. Yeah, we're seeing them over and over. There are 2 bills that are kind of novel, and I want to talk about why we need to be particularly wary about this kind of bill. And so we've got SB 1586. So this increases medical liability for physicians who treat minors for gender-affirming care, right? Who treat trans kids and help them in any medical way through the transition process. And it increases their liability for medical malpractice, essentially, up to 25 years, which is a huge amount of time, right?
That's including mental health?
I don't think so. I think it's just physical health, but I'm not sure. Let me check on that. I need to read the bill again. So I'll get back to you. I'm not entirely sure. But 25 years for medical malpractice is an absurd standard, right? What I think this does, aside from the harm that it creates to trans people and limiting... It
wants to shut down...
Yeah. It wants to, basically, these kinds of bills...
The liability is so high that you can't take the risk.
That you can't practice this kind of medicine. But I think that also could extend to other kinds of medicine, right? So what impact does that have on IVF and surrogacy and fertility treatments and on experimental cancer drugs? This is a dangerous precedent, not just because of the discriminatory way that it impacts medical care for transgender people and potentially discourages physicians from doing any sort of medical care for trans people. This could be trans care, but maybe also just general care, right? Who knows? It could just discourage trans physicians from treating trans people in general, but it also may have unintended consequences in other areas of medicine where we need to be
innovative approaches.
Exactly. So
to save lives.
Exactly. Okay. So, and then there's another one, SB 1687. This makes physicians who do treat minors for trans minors for medical care around transition, it makes it a class 1 misdemeanor. And so I am always wary of anytime we are telling doctors that by them practicing medicine, they're committing a crime. I think it's a bad precedent. It's not a good look. We don't want to do that.
Committing a crime and we're going to fine you and we're going to end your career.
Exactly. So
very demonstrative.
Yeah, and just bad precedents, right? Again, this is just doesn't make sense. It's not how medicine is practiced. It creates a dangerous precedent that may not end with trans people and trans minors. So,
when we were having our last conversation about the executive orders, it really seemed to me like initially we're going after transgender Americans, right, but that things are written really broadly, so that these executive orders can apply to a whole host of folks.
Yes.
And it seems like both of these bills are written broadly as well, and
and again, set that dangerous precedent, right? I mean, think of I have thyroid disease, right? And so I had a tumor, had to have it removed. I have to take daily medication for it. I have to have different annual screenings and things to make sure nothing crazy is happening, blood work all the time. What if the medical malpractice for my physician who saved my life took out the thyroid tumor that was the size of a chicken egg, a very large chicken egg, by the way, so very scary.
You had a chicken egg, I had a grapefruit.
Yes.
I mean, between the two of us, we're like making a mean breakfast.
We are. I love it.
Very mean.
Very mean breakfast. I love it. Healthy. But what if we extended, right, like the medical malpractice for 25 years for that procedure, right? I had that procedure 12 years ago or something like that at this point. I'm perfectly healthy, but who knows what's going to happen in 5 more years, and it may have nothing to do with the surgery that this wonderful surgeon did for me
12 years ago.
Right. And helped to save my life, right? And helped to improve my health significantly over the last 12 years. But if there's something at some point a lawyer feels like they could trace back in my medical care to him, right? That's crazy. It's a disaster
waiting to happen.
It is a disaster waiting to happen. It makes no sense. And it just will basically lower the standard of healthcare available to Americans, which is the last thing that we need, right?
No,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Whew.
Yeah, that's a lot. Right. I know.
So, giving the current set of circumstances we find ourselves in,
yes,
I mean, people are really looking for a way to engage, and I think also to bring that fear down, right?
Yes.
And so, I think we've already talked about the fact that we really need to do an educational campaign, and really it seems like a thank you campaign to Governor Hobbs.
100%.
And so I think it would be so wonderful for equality and one community to work collaboratively with any other LGBTQ inclusive organization that wants to thank her for being the actionable ally that she has been, and encourage her to continue to do so and to veto these 18 anti-LGBTQ bills that will likely be hitting her desk.
That will harm our community, right? That will in so many ways. And
this is my whole thing, and this is my big thing around SB 1062, right, as well, which was in 2014, is when you are targeting and discriminating against a population, it does not encourage people to want to move here, right?
Exactly.
When there's an uptick on people feeling like they can say some interesting things, or harassing someone simply based on their sexual orientation, or that issue that we saw at the In-N-Out Burger, which was really concerning. And that woman was just emboldened to just say and do whatever she felt like she wanted to do, and it really, really traumatized that LGBTQ family.
Poor family.
When you see these things happening, they're targeting LGBTQ people, or they're targeting members of diverse communities. But this impacts everyone in our great state. It's important that people feel safe being here. If we want to attract and retain the best and brightest, we need to be a state that truly does value everyone and cares about safety for all Arizonans.
Right.
If we want to, tourism is just our top export. If we want people to visit this big, bold, beautiful state, again, safety is a top concern, and we need to be a state that welcomes everyone in whatever region of this bold and beautiful state that we're in. And so while these bills are meant to harm LGBTQ people, these 18 that we're talking about, my concern is, and I think it's really important that people understand, they're targeting a diverse minority community. The impact will be felt around this great state.
It will be, and it will. When I think of tourism specifically, and I think of how important it is for safety to be available for all kinds of people. I think about the civil rights era, before the civil rights era, the segregation, Jim Crow era of the South, and how Black communities literally had to put together these books that they called the Green Book, right? Which told you which hotels you could stay at as a Black person, which places you could eat, right, in different states, because in so many states.
So you knew how to traverse your way through, right?
Exactly.
Well, we've had that in our LGBTQ community.
We've
had booklets that were like, these are inclusive hotels.
They used to hand them out at Pride, remember?
They used to hand them out at Pride. And now we've got the internet. And so, but it leads me to the Unity Pledge.
Yes.
Which I keep thinking is going to get stale at some point. It's remarkable to me that this pledge is so important.
Yeah.
We've had 3,800 businesses and organizations of all shapes and sizes that have a really big footprint in the state of Arizona take the Unity Pledge,
which is amazing,
including a number of tourism, DMOs, and Arizona Lodging and Tourism. We know that the tourism community believes that we should be a state that celebrates, respects, and protects us all.
Yes.
But what I really want to do is encourage businesses that haven't taken the pledge to take it.
Yes.
Because I really think that the Open for Business to Everyone sign, or we've got these little decals that retailers can put on their window now,
which are so awesome.
Which are going to be really, really important as we work through these difficult times, right? Because people want to know that they are, number one, shopping with a retailer that is aligned with their inclusive values. And then also, visiting a restaurant or a hotel or a region that is inclusive as well. And so I think signing the Unity Pledge is remarkably just as important as it's ever been. And I want to close with this. When we launch with one community, when we launched, not with one community, but when we launched one community 16 years ago, our opening tagline was, "You vote with your wallet every day," right? And our whole thing was support inclusive businesses, right? And that, I think, is really, it's the power of the purse, it's the power of the wallet that each of us have. I've never been interested in, I don't think you boycott because I think I'm not into negative behavior. I'm into affirming good behavior, right?
Support good businesses.
Businesses, right? And I just think that businesses that want to have a sustainable future are businesses that are truly open and welcoming to everyone.
They are. And that's something that everyday Arizonans, one, you can sign it yourself as an everyday Arizonan, but also every business that you frequent, every business, that you are a patron of, tell them that you want them to sign the Unity Pledge.
Encourage them to sign the Unity Pledge,
exactly,
right? Which, by the way, I really do encourage people to read the pledge.
Yes.
Because it's not an LGBTQ pledge.
No.
I think that's really important. This is a pledge that says we value everyone, regardless of their culture, their age, their orientation, their identity, their religious beliefs. We value everyone. We are open for business to everyone. And that is the key, right?
Exactly.
We've never believed in any type of exclusion. I'm so proud of the work that we do together at the Capitol with our Equality and Fairness for All Arizonans bill. The fact that we want to make sure that religious minorities are protected in employment, because when you look at statistics, religious minorities have the highest percentage of discrimination in employment.
They do.
Equality should mean equality for everyone.
Exactly. It's not conditional, right? That's actually the great promise of this country, is that it isn't who you are that determines your rights. It's that everyone has rights, and you get to use those rights and opportunities to your greatest extent, to the greatest extent you can, through your own talents, right?
The opportunity to thrive,
exactly.
Right? And I think
everyone has that.
I want to end with this thought, Michael, and that is, we are not looking for special rights. We are looking for equal rights. We want to make sure that LGBTQ plus Arizonans have the same opportunity to thrive in this great state as every other remarkable citizen in this great state. This is about equal opportunity. It's about being open for business to everyone. And you know what? We've managed our way through difficult times in the past. I know that we're going to find our way through this time too.
We are, and I think that more people are going to understand that. After Obergefell, right? There's sort of a lull in the understanding.
Oh, we got there,
right? We accomplished everything. We did, right? There's a lot of work to do still to make sure we live in a state and a nation where equality for all means equality for all.
Absolutely. So good to see you.
So good to see you too. Thanks for having me.